Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. So a very warm welcome to our seminar today, which is being hosted jointly by the Centre for Digital Society at the University of Gadjah Mada and through the Policy Evaluation and Research Unit at Manchester Metropolitan University. So it's very good to see so many people joining us today. Just to say that this is the kind of latest joint seminar in a series that we've been running for the last 2 years or so. And we're very pleased today that we are focusing on the gig economy, and we have two presentations from colleagues at the Centre for Digital Society and also from Manchester Metropolitan University. So the format, just to give you a bit of idea, is that we're going to have the presentations first, and then after the presentations that we are having, we will then take questions and have a discussion and talk through some of the issues that our speakers have raised with us. So without further ado, I'm very pleased to welcome our first speaker, Cosmin, from Manchester Metropolitan University. Very good to see you, Cosmin. And Cosmin is going to draw on his research into the gig economy. And I'll hand over to Cosmin. So Cosmin, I think you've got about 20 minutes, something like that, or 25 minutes for your talk. And then after your talk, we'll then hand over to Trevi from the Centre for Digital Society. And if you have any questions in the audience, please put them in the chat as appropriate, and we'll pick them up a little bit later. So Cosmin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you to all the members in the audience. It's quite a diverse audience, as I understand. I am currently based in Romania, where I'm doing my research for this project on platform food deliveries, and we're having this conversation across meridians, which is quite exciting. Even more so, considering the fact that indeed the gig economy is a global phenomenon, and myself personally, I'm very interested to hear a bit more about what's happening in that part of the world, which is Indonesia, because I have conducted research obviously in the UK. I'm currently based in Romania, where I'm conducting fieldwork, but I don't know a lot of things about many other places where this gig economy is rampant. So I will share the screen with you. And hopefully this will work. Okay. Is this working?
I can't see it at the moment, Cosmin.
Okay. It says Chrome has lost permission to capture your screen. So I'm pressing the share and then slides or share screen, which is the option here.
I think it's share screen is the option to go for, I think, Cosmin.
Mm-hmm. Not sure, it doesn't allow me to do that for some reason.
Ah, right. Okay.
I can share this screen of mine, but that's about it. I seem to be able to share. Sorry about this. I thought it was more straightforward. Would it make sense to have this document sent? And
yeah, maybe if you could send, is it possible to maybe send it to our CfDS colleagues, if you can perhaps just email it to them now, Cosmin, and then perhaps our colleagues can perhaps put it on the screen for us.
Just a second, I will send this ASAP.
That's okay.
So I'm going to try to send the PDF version as well.
Okay. Okay. I'm just wondering while you're doing that, Cosmin, are you okay with that?
It takes a bit of time to load.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Just take whatever time you need. It's okay. I'm sure. I'm sure the audience are familiar that sometimes technology isn't quite as easy as we'd like it to be. In the meantime, I hope that everyone is doing okay. Just to say that here in the UK, where I'm based in Derbyshire. It's a very cold day. I guess that isn't the case in Yogyakarta. I think your temperature is probably a lot warmer than it is here. But we've been forecast for this weekend for snowstorms and wind. In fact, we have a tendency here to name storms after the names of people. So apparently, we have Storm Arwen that is due to hit us this weekend. And for those people who are fans of Lord of the Rings, as I'm sure some of you are, I am, I have to confess. I think Arwen was one of the lead characters in Lord of the Rings. She was sort of, I'm babbling a little bit here, but anyway, she was both, I think, part elf and part man, as I recall. Cosmin, did you manage to send the presentation?
I am uploading one file here in the stream as well. So
okay, all right. Okay, let's see if we can get it to work.
Work now. Yeah.
Great. Okay, over to you, Cosmin. That looks great. Okay, that's fine. Go for it.
Okay, so I'm going to present today a chapter that is in print, basically, which draws from my research in Manchester on platform food couriers, doing mostly deliveries on cycles. So most of the presentation here will be with regards to cyclists doing delivery, but on the other hand, there's a lot of other people who are doing these kind of jobs, who are doing it with motorcycles. I think that's mostly the case in Southeastern Asia, as far as I can tell. Loads of people doing deliveries here in car, for example, in Romania, because it's very hilly and also very cold in the winter. So the presentation is done based on this research I have already undertaken in Manchester, and also some research that a colleague of mine, Esther Anaya, who could not make it today, based at Imperial College of London, has done with regards to Spain and South America. So it would be based on this particular case study, but having said that, I will try to make reference to a couple of things happening in Indonesia, not claiming that I know a lot about this part of the world. So I will first discuss just a bit about cycling and how there's a link between cycling, work, and deliveries that's been there for some time, and how this has been exploited by the gig economy more recently. Then I will look more specifically at the types of precarities and vulnerabilities that cyclists in particular, but not necessarily just them, have when it comes to these kind of jobs. on the one hand, obviously the road and the risks of being on a road, particularly as a cyclist, as a vulnerable road user, and then more generally with regards to the precarity that's embedded within the gig economy, I argue. And then I would focus on two particular categories of couriers who are more vulnerable than the vast majority, even though sometimes these migrants people in particular, they would represent the biggest percentage of workers doing deliveries, at least in the UK, not necessarily the case in Romania, not necessarily the case in Indonesia. I will then try to finish on a more positive notes, kind of discussing what kind of forms of resistance there are, both individual and collective, before then heading to some concluding remarks. Okay, so I have sent a link around for particularly the colleagues in Indonesia. I would like to know what apps you use most when ordering food online, and I bet that quite a few of you, if not the vast majority, have used at least once such a platform for delivery. So I have a link to a poll that I'm not sure if has been already sent around. Probably yes, I see it has. And if you mind just picking one option to see which are your preferences, so we can then discuss a bit about what's happening in Indonesia, because that would be a good entry point for our conversation today. So I have here responses, 2 of them so far, probably there are some more. Probably have more audience from the UK. I should have added Deliveroo and Uber Eats, but you might type them in the comments if that's the case, and then we can make some sort of a standing with who tops the food delivery platforms preferences in the UK, and then maybe Indonesia as well. I have here 6 responses already, which are 3 for GoFood, 2 for Grab Foods, and somebody else who uses another one. And 7, so GoFood seems to go as the leading platform in Indonesia. 4 out of 7. Okay, so that was a bit of a game, because indeed what I will be also arguing in this presentation is that game plays an important role in explaining the popularity of these platforms. Okay, so this is what Statista says when it comes to the most used apps for food delivery orders in Indonesia, and indeed GoFood and GrabFood seems to be the most used platforms. At the same time, I have found some information with regards to the food delivery service market in Indonesia, which seems to be the largest one in Southeast Asia. $3.7 billion for this gross merchandise value, and this amounts to more than $10 billion across the region, up 183% from last year. So this shows the popularity of these platforms in Southeast Asia and across the world. And as with the research I have been conducting here in Europe and the kind of working conditions I have researched myself, I could see indeed that there are similar struggles in that part of the world, both in Indonesia and in other countries in the region, with workers going on strike to protest oftentimes precarious working conditions. Okay, so back to cycling and to work and deliveries and the link between the three, because I argue here that both the bicycles and this work, gig work, platform work, there is a paradox of flexibility for both of them. So there's a flexibility with bicycles with regards to uh, um, both normative physical capabilities and urban environments, meaning that it is understood that the bicycle can be used by anyone. It's such an inclusive tool. Everybody can cycle. There's a lot of kind of conceptions that once you learn to ride a bicycle, you know to do this for the rest of your life. And it's similar. Oftentimes you see today in many cities across the world with cycling being promoted as the most obvious thing to do to fight congestion, climate change, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, platform work is also advertised as this flexible kind of work, which I argue obscures and hides from view the precarities that are associated with this kind of work. So there are quite interesting affinities here between the two when it comes to their popularity and also the reasons why there's this affinity between the two. And obviously there's a history of cycles being used to go to work, but also more recently to do the work itself. So we have the cycle messengers from the 80s and 90s and the pop culture that has been circulated around them, this Premium Rush blockbuster Hollywood movie. And then this is kind of a legacy for what we have today, where internet has made these cycle messengers ubiquitous, we can argue, in the digital age. So my argument here is that there are different layers of precarity that we have to understand when looking at what happens with these working conditions for food couriers, be they on bikes or cars or scooters. So there's this flexibility of cycling and work and how they are related to play, which I think is very important to highlight here. So cycling has had this ambiguous relationship with work and play. On the one hand, it's been dismissed as something that it's not a vehicle, shouldn't be on the roads, it's for children, it's for those who don't fit into the society. Oftentimes, these are the kind of histories you hear with cycling in the last couple of decades. Maybe this kind of a pattern changing. At the same time, we have seen this cycling being co-opted in the gig economy. On the other hand, there's this gamification that platforms kind of try to use to keep users and cyclists as couriers captive in these platforms and making them putting scores on them, giving them incentives, giving them challenges, which are all about gamified experience of the work. So this precarity here, I argue, comes from on the one hand, this vulnerable situation that cyclists found themselves in when they are on the road, the vulnerability that comes with insecure spaces, disregard for the spaces they are supposed to be using, police neglect when it comes to accidents, and so on and so forth. But adding to this precarity on the road, of being on the road, there's also this other types of dimensions to what precarious work means by adding discussions which have to do with race, with class, with gender and disability. And I will be focusing precisely on gender issue and migratory status here, which I think are important to discuss in relation to the gig work. So this argument that precarity is beyond just economic insecurity. I want to show how issues of identity, gender, family, national membership, they contribute further to what means to be precarious today doing these kind of jobs. Okay, so there is the gender aspect, which I think is very important here. There's a gender gap. Obviously, when it comes to people doing deliveries, most of them are male. It's a very gendered kind of a work. The one that is food deliveries, so would be the taxi driving, the Uber kind of a situation. I know in the gig economy, on the other hand, there's not such a big gender gap when it comes to other types of platform work. There's also a background in cycling, obviously, that reflects further down the gender gap we see within these workers in the gig economy. And this has to do, to an extent, with the physical effort that's required for someone to be on a bike for many hours. At times, this perceived competency, who is the competent cyclist, who is the competent worker, deliverer, seeing that this workforce is mainly composed of males, there's also this kind of perceptions of appropriate courier. Not to mention also the physical effort that in many cases comes with carrying a lot of shopping that sometimes is being ordered from supermarkets, like 10 liters of water that one has to carry around sometimes from the supermarket on a bike, sometimes other times in a car. But it's quite a physical effort that's there, which impacts on women in particular. Then there's obviously self-protection strategies that women would follow in order to protect themselves from hostility, sexual harassment, neglect. And they can be either individual or group related. Sometimes they would avoid particular areas in the city, women doing cycling and doing deliveries, or even in cars sometimes. They would be kept away from WhatsApp groups where important things are being discussed, such as dangerous areas or long waiting times at restaurants, because these spaces are male-dominated, quite machist and quite problematic from this point of view. Hiding sometimes in clothes that kind of protect them from being recognized as women. And I have seen girls in Manchester doing this kind of just wrapping stuff around themselves so they wouldn't look like women doing deliveries. And this leads to, obviously, to missing information from peers. So because everything is learning through mistakes with these kind of platforms, there's hardly any training for working in a gig economy. You have to learn by doing, basically. And this means when you don't have this peer support group, loads of missing information and financial disadvantage that comes as a consequence. On the other hand, there's group strategies, women's social networks, WhatsApp, unions, and so forth, particularly in Spain and South America, that my colleague Esther has been discussing about in this chapter that is currently in print. Also, there's with regards to women, there's this problem with exposure in the public space, constant exposure to harassment, and they have to work oftentimes in permanent state of vigilance and tension. I could notice this as I was following the women, even in cars, saying that if I were here on my own doing deliveries, not having you as a researcher with me, a male, I would have been in a strange situation. I would have felt quite unsecure. You see, sometimes at night, 12 o'clock in some areas in Cluj, even, which is quite a safe city. This perception of safety is very important. Here, one of the illustrators for my project has drawn a pepper spray that a courier in Manchester, this girl is using. She hasn't got to use it, but she carries it at all times because she's afraid that something might happen. Sexual harassment, obviously, and more linked to the pandemic is the fact that as many restaurants were closed and they weren't allowing people to come and go, lack of access to toilets, increased risk of urinary infections, which is particularly prevalent for women, and also working while in pain, recovering from labor, exhaustion because of pregnancy or motherhood. Yesterday, I was following somebody doing deliveries, a mother of 2, 5 and 3, and she was exhausted at the end of a 10-hour shift, and she was telling me as she was driving away from the city to where she was based, half an hour away, at 12 o'clock in the night, I'm afraid that I will fall asleep. while I'm driving back home. And I was like, I'm going to text you just to make sure you get home safe. Moving on to migrants, there's an overrepresentation of migrants, particularly in this part of the world. I'm not sure about the situation in Indonesia. And obviously, this level of precarity when it comes to the work they do depend very much on individual circumstances, but also the migrant status, which is very important. There's an algorithm which biases oftentimes against diverse workers, this face recognition technology which fails to recognize Black people. There's a lot of stories about this with Uber in particular. And also there's various phenomena that have to do with being documented or undocumented, which is app renting, for example. You would rent the app, but then obviously there's undercover raids done by the Met Office in the UK, as you can see in that photos there. There's also this risk of actually being sent back to your respective country, and with this up renting from somebody else, there's basically a disappearance of all rights, which nevertheless they weren't that many with working directly for these platforms. And then obviously when it comes to having their voices heard, it's also difficult because they wouldn't speak the language oftentimes, the migrants, or if they did, they might have a problem with their migrant status, and they would be afraid that they wouldn't know exactly what their rights are, they would be deported, and so on and so forth. And to finish off, there's hope here. And despite the grim realities I have been presenting, and I hope I managed to sensitize you at least to the working conditions in this sector, the platform food deliveries. There's a capacity for platform food workers to self-organize, despite their very problematic way in which they are spread across cities, how they manage to get to know each other and to organize in the workplace, which there's no workplace anymore. The city has become the workplace. So there's individual strategies on the one hand to resist this kind of algorithmic management of work, which has to do with sometimes working for multiple platforms, rejecting long distance orders, switching to different vehicle accounts to get more orders, delaying the collection of orders from restaurants to be allocated a double order to make more money. Or you have more collective forms of resistance, which are cooperatives that we increasingly see across Europe, where these cooperatives, they pool resources to develop shared open source software and try to mount a resistance to platform capitalism with platform cooperativism. Then there's strikes that we have seen. There's strikes in Asia, and probably there's some sort of coordination already happening in Asia. This is happening already in Europe with many strikers kind of connecting with one another, and there's hope in this international coordination. And obviously more recent unions that have appeared that are not just the established ones that have an issue with recognizing these new working arrangements where these people are not workers and they cannot be, and they are not indeed represented by more traditional unions in the UK at least. And there are more recent ones which try to include this so-called self-employed, even though it's very clear that it's much more complicated than them being self-employed. And actually there's claims and there's been cases in the court where it has been proved that these people are indeed employees. And these more unions are more attuned to these new realities that digital work enables. And these are pretty much the conclusions, the intersectional layers of precarity when it comes to the work in the gig economy, which comes on the one hand from being on the road, being vulnerable on the road, being more vulnerable on the road if you are on a cycle than increasingly so if you are, less so, but nevertheless quite important. If you are in a car, you can be exhausted and just sleep while you drive, and this is something that has happened to at least one person I have spoken with. And there's a minority of women, also majority of migrants doing this kind of works, and they are hidden, and their experiences are hidden from view. And they are also indicative of additional discriminations that we have to be aware when we discuss the gig economy. And organization, despite this situation, is still possible, and it is created at street level. And the bicycles in particular, because I have been kind of focusing this presentation on bicycles, they have this capacity to create sociabilities. You just go in the city, you wait around for an order, you have somebody else which is on a cycle as well, and this can be used potentially as an instrument to resist and to mount resistance to these unfair working conditions in the gig economy. And this is it from me. I think I went into half an hour almost. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to hearing your comments and questions.
That's great. Thank you very much, Cosmin, for a very interesting and enlightening presentation. So, just to say to our members of our audience, actually, if you have any questions for Cosmin, but also for Trevi, then please put them in the chat, and we'll pick up on them in about 20-25 minutes time after Trevi has given her presentation. So welcome, Trevi, to the seminar. It's very good to see you.
Good to see you too.
And we're very much looking forward to your talk. And I think you're going to be talking about women and how the digital gig economy has affected women, in principally in Indonesia. So very interested to hear from you. So over to you, Trevi.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin, and also Cosmin. I've listened to Cosmin's presentation before, and I think there are actually quite some similar experiences with Indonesia, although there are also some differences, especially in the case of like migrants, probably that's like not very salient in Indonesia's case. So good afternoon, everyone, or good morning in Manchester, probably.
Thank you.
So I would like to present my research. It's actually our research in the Center for Digital Society. It's a team. We are working with the Fair Work team globally, and we are working within the Indonesia's region. So we actually assess ratings for the gig economy platform in Indonesia. But within the research, we also get to find some findings regarding specific contexts, including the gender issue that is happening in the gig economy sector in Indonesia. And when I say gig economy here also, I would like to note that we are here focusing only on the ride hailing, especially in the motorbike taxis sector, because I think in some other countries, we got to see many women working on like service industry or like what Cosmin also has presented before in the courier ones. But the one that's very salient in Indonesia is the motorbike taxi driver. So when we talk about gig economy in Indonesia, well, gig economy consists of like so many different kind of like work, different kind of like occupation, and there can be something that's we can say like almost invisible, like people don't get to see who work for them, like freelancing, like you can buy a picture or like a design from somewhere else, like in like Japan or China, and you just stay here in Indonesia. However, what we are going to look at here is the kind of gig economy that is like more on location based, that requires like a meeting between the customer and also the workers. Here we refer to the motorbike taxis, and more specifically, women motorbike taxis driver. So please, Mas Bayu, next slide. Okay, thank you. So here we refer motorbike taxi in Indonesia as ojek. So this kind of like occupation and this kind of sector on motorbike taxis has exists like long way before like decades before 2000. So it's been there. It's like conventional occupation job. However, the most interesting part is actually the emergence of this woman motorbike taxi driver has only emerged after the platform entered the sector. So before, we do not see a conventional motorbike taxi driver being women. They're mostly a man, and even we associate motorbike taxi driver as men. So it is interesting actually, and we are actually interested also to look at why women more women entering into this sector once the platform came in. Is it because the platform have the provide the area for the women to participate, or probably is there something else that's shifting also within the community, within the Indonesian context, that allows women to also becoming part of this workforce? So I think you can see also on the screen here the two women as the motorbike taxi driver here. The two platforms that is big in Indonesia, Gojek and GrabBike, they both offer new recruitments specifically for women, especially the Grab ones. They even have a special recruitment only for women. And like in that kind of like recruitment, they do not compete with like the male drivers or like the would-be male drivers. They only are like being pulled with other women. So it's also interesting the fact that among all the women motorbike taxi drivers that we interviewed within this research are mostly in the middle of like their 30s and 40s. Mind you that the maximum age for this occupation is 50 years old. So even in their 40s, like late 40s, they're still like we can still see like many women motorbike taxi drivers in this workforce. And also the demography that later on I will also tell you, explain later on the following slides, is that the kind of like dependence on income that is will be very related to the discussion of flexibility that we will be talking about. What kind of flexibility that we are talking about when we talk about the woman in this kind of like occupation. Next slide, please, Mas Bayu. Okay, so we were conducting the research by interview to in the 5 cities. There's Yogyakarta, Surabaya, Jakarta, Makassar, and Medan. So these 5 cities spread across island in Indonesia. So one in Sumatra Island and also one in Sulawesi Island, but the other are from like some big cities in Indonesia. So we would like to see some sample from like the experience of different kind of like cities and different kind of like situation and demographies in different cities. And we are also looking at the drivers that have been working in the platform for like at least 1 year to see their real experience. Probably when you are like reading the articles about women or like gig economy in Indonesia in the early years, you might see that there are a lot of promises when they can earn money like much more than the local living wage and local minimum wage, but that would be a different experience, especially as we enter the pandemic or COVID-19 era, where their income has decreased like significantly. Next, please, Mas Bayu. Okay, so this is the kind of like thing flexibility that we are looking like further in our research. So many like promises of gig economy and like platforms on why you have to apply to become part of us. This is kind of like the occupation that you have to commit and like bring your own motorcycle and like do not have insurance even, and you even have to buy your own jackets and also helmet and service your motorcycle by yourself and buy your own fuel and like vehicle servicing. And also, why would anyone want to be working in that kind of like uncertain situation and without much benefits. So many of like the commercials and like ads for like asking people or like promoting people to join the platform mostly offers about the promise of flexibility. So first, if you can see here, it's in Indonesia, so they offer kind of like you can get more income with a flexible time. It's easy to register, but that's not the case with the current situation, as they are currently like limiting the number of the drivers due to like like demands and supply. So it's not that easy as it was like last year and the year before. So flexibility has been something that's seen as very essential on like uh, attracting people to join the platform. So here we see about the kind of like flexibility that that is appraised, and also the this kind of like flex time and also flex place, where like in the transportation based sector, the flex time, and also you can work within like from like 5 a.m. to like 7 p.m., or like you can start like your day at like 12 at noon and then end your work by like 9 p.m. That's something that's very much highly appraised by platforms, and like probably most articles when they are talking about this gig economy. So first, schedule flexibility to decide the time where they start and stop their job-related activities, like where you start, where you stop, and also workers' ability to also manage the number of hours they work per day or per week. So in this case, in the sense of like flexibility, then workers should be able to have the freedom to choose what like how many hours they want to invest like in the platform, or like online time and like available time where they are able to accept the job, accept the order for like ride hailing, for example. And they are also free to choose when to start and when to end the job related orders, for example. However, let's move to the next slide, Mas Bayu. Okay. Um, I'm drawing from the work of Ladun Virta here, that like when we're talking about flexibility in the gig economy, there are actually two structural constraints for the workers themselves. That is, first, I think Cosmin has mentioned before about the algorithmic based distribution of work. So you cannot really decide like what kind of order that will come to you. It's the algorithm from the platform that decides what kind of job, like what kind of order, where they from, that you will receive, and you have to, not you have to, but like you are suggested to accept. And also the dependence on income from the work. So when gig work becoming a main source of income, then that kind of like promise of flexibility is no longer there, because then you are bound to earn some money for your living. So it's no longer becoming something that's like flex time, where you can decide how many hours you want to work, because otherwise you do not get to fulfill the standard of your living and pay for your kids tuition and all. So how are these constraints that Lahdon Vita has mentioned about the gig worker in general will face when they're working in this kind of like sector applied to the experience of women gig workers in motorbike taxis sector. Next, Mas Bayu. So we actually mapped out the kind of like structural constraints that's experienced by the women working in this sector. First, about the availability of work. So it is applied to everyone working in the platform, that their work, their job distribution is based on this algorithmic decision making by the platforms. However, women are more in a more unfortunate situation rather than their male counterparts due to several factors. So, in Indonesia, we've got like several platforms in the ride-hailing sectors, and there are platforms that decide someone or like a worker to receive more orders if they are having more available time on the platform. So they are available online to receive orders longer than the others, then they got more prioritized. So they are seen as a more reliable worker because they are able to receive more orders and like stay in the platform, stay online to receive orders in the like at least like 8 hours per day. However, that's the thing that most of our respondents and also workers in especially women cannot fulfill because of their double burden with domestic chores that they have to do aside of their work. So many of our respondents stated that we want to actually, if we can, to work as long as the male counterparts, but we cannot do that if their like male counterparts can start working like starting out like at 5 a.m. to until like 10 p.m. for example. We cannot do that. We have kids, we have our husband that, and we have to feed them like from the early in the morning, and then like when they get back from school, when they get back from work, we also have to be there at home for them. So in this case, we cannot really have that many income. We cannot really have that flexibility to decide how many hours do we want to be in the platform. And less active hours would then contribute to their kind of like level of priorities in the platform, that they wouldn't get that many orders as their male counterpart. So that's one problem that our respondents has also told us, that well, they since they have to work in the domestic course also, they'll have less active hours, then they do not get to have as many orders as their male counterparts who can have like more active hours in the platform. Second is customer cancellation. I think this is something that's also related to what Cosmin has mentioned before about a woman being a courier, and it's not something that's very conventional for women being a courier, or in this case, being a driver. There are actually some issues around this case. It's not just about capability. So many might question their ability to drive, and not many male counterparts experience the same thing. When a customer get the driver, it's a woman, and not many and in comparison to the male driver, not many customer will ask the male drivers, can you really drive me well? But that's the thing that's all often happen to the women drivers. So that's about the capability questions from the customer, but also about appropriateness. That's I think it is kind of like the society that kind of like quite some communities that are more like patriarchal. They don't see it is appropriate for a male to ride a motorcycle with a woman like in the front that drive the motorbike. So I think it's also posted. I posted in the screen what kind of like responses that I got. First about like cancellation. Many cancel my order because their orders because I'm a woman. It's almost every day, at least once a day, I got a cancellation because I'm a woman. And when they see us picking up the customer, and they say, "You're a woman. I'm sorry, I'm not used to being on a ride with a woman. May I cancel the order?" So it is very exactly that they state their hesitancy to write with them is not because other things, but it's because they are a woman. So that's also something that made them having a less flexibility in accepting orders, or like wanting to work long hours and all, because there is some hesitancy also coming from the customer themselves. And third is about sexual harassment. Mind you, this is a motorbike, and the physical closeness is like very salient in this case. If you ever ride a scooter or a motorbike, so some women also reporting getting some discrimination and sexual harassment from the customer, and this is something that actually quite interesting to look at, because some motorbike taxi, like some women told us that um, sometimes they just like let it slide if it's not something that's, they say, like very big. They wouldn't want to report the customer because they're afraid that, you know, like their friends or like the platform will not side with them, even though some platforms have introduced the kind of like policy to protect their women drivers, but there is still instilled within them the fear that the woman is the one to blame if you ever experience a harassment. Probably, even this is also very salient with among women drivers. For example, some might say that they get harassed. I know someone get harassed, but I think that's because she even dressed up for the work. Why would a driver want to dress up? It's not necessary. Probably, I think she deserves to get treated that way. So I think it's interesting because, like, even among the women driver themselves, this kind of like thought, like train of thought of like women blaming themselves of not being able to protect themselves fully, being in this kind of occupation is still very salient. So I think that's one thing that we need to address as a community and society also. And the second constraint, next, Mas Bayu, it's the dependence on income. So while we got the first constraint on the availability of work, that's based on algorithm, that's based on the kind of like job that they can get. The second is about the dependence on income. So this is also interesting because in Indonesian society, usually it's the father, the male that become the breadwinner of the family. However, we also, I think, in the recent years, we're seeing more and more women become the breadwinner of the family. So that this is also something that's very like echoed into the woman experience. So for some women, when they are not income dependent on the object or like the work, then they are very flexible to pick whatever job they want to do. So this is one example that someone says that I was getting bored of staying at home after resigning from my full-time job, so I was just looking for a side job. And the other, we've seen the income dependent woman as a single mother or like the breadwinner of the family, they have to work longer hours, which related to quite some small number of other arguments for women drivers and have less choice. So um, mind you that, you know, they cannot really start like very early in the morning because they have to provide for the family also. They start at like 7 a.m. in the morning, and with the rate of cancellation, with the rate of like the kind of like active hours that cannot be as many as their male counterparts, then they need to work harder in this kind of like situation. And even some of them also still work like 12 hours a day. And I agree, I think Cosmin mentioned before, like even some of them say that they get sleepy on the road, and that's also not very safety and not very secure, especially when they ride long distance especially. And in this case about these women breadwinner also, um, they they still also have this double burden of like taking care of the family and also working in the platform. And in this way, you know, like again, the structural constraints about availability of time also echoed again in this woman experience. So next, Mas Bayu, to sum up. Okay, to sum up the Mas Bayu. Yeah. Okay, to sum up to map the kind of constraints that women motorbike taxi drivers or ojek online experience in this situation is that there is this type of constraints of the availability of work and also the dependence of income. So there is this influencing factors, whether algorithm or like norms, culture, and the explanation of it, and also the dependence of income. So all these four factors intertwine together and make like specific like structural constraints to the women ojek online drivers in Indonesia. Next, Mas Bayu. Okay. Okay, I think the figure kind of like tweaked. Yeah, so this is the kind of like relations that we are like seeing in the relations between the constraining factors and also the experience flexibility. So first we have this constraints about the supply and demand balance and societal gender norms where like every woman experience in this kind of situation. They all face the same thing about sexual harassment. They all face the same thing about higher rate of cancellation due to being a woman. However, it will become worse. The experience of flexibility become like almost nothing, like no flexibility at all when it comes to the income dependency. When like some of us probably imagine the working as a ojek online driver for women, probably it's a side job only and not to be a full-time job. But we see like a lot of like single mother, the breadwinner of the family, because they cannot enter the conventional job market, then they become the ojek online driver. Then this is their main job, then they have in full income dependency to this job, then the flexibility is no longer there. So the promise of flexibility, once that's like very glorified in many promotion about the gig economy, is not there when you are like you rely on it for your income dependency. And also when you're a woman there, you don't have that many benefits or like competitions, right? That in comparison to the your male friends within the same sector. And lastly, probably Mas Bayu, I will end it with the initial findings. So yeah, platforms often highlight the flexibility of gig work to attract individuals to join. However, uh, this research and our finding shows that flexibility is very conditional. It's not just like everyone can experience that. If like again about the income dependency and etc. And the two factors about the supply demand balance and also gender norms also lead to a different experience of flexibility and through different types of income dependency. Um, for the income dependent woman, mostly single mother or like the breadwinner of the family, facing a rather inflexibility as they are constrained by more stuff than their male counterparts, like gender norms, sexual harassment, and also little choice also to opt out from the existing situation, as there are not many choice for them outside of this kind of like occupations in the non-formal job markets. Overall, so we can see that even though like with digital transformation, they say like the gig economy where everyone have the access to work, have the access to job, we see that there might not be that much different when we are looking with the general economy, where women still facing and occupy a more precarious condition than their men counterparts. Yeah. So last slide. Thank you very much. That was our initial finding, and this research and project also we've got the funding from the IDRCs for the ratings, but also with the kind of like discussion about the finding and about gender within it. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward for your questions and responses.
Great. Thank you very much, Trevi. And again, thank you very much earlier on, Cosmin, for your presentation. So two very interesting presentations, and I think there's some interesting overlaps between them. So it'd be great to take some questions now. So I'm just going to kind of have a look to see the questions, and then I'll see if I can pass them on to Cosmin and to Trevi. So I think a question for you, Cosmin, and this is from I think Hannah Una. That's what I read anyway. And they'd like to know about the tensions and contradictions of worker agency in the gig economy on the food courier. And I think we can see the question there on the screen as well, Cosmin. So do you have any thoughts on that, Cosmin? I think you can read on the screen there.
I'm just having a look.
Yeah, okay.
It's what are the impact of precarious work contracts on demand, or is that?
No. The one that we're looking at is about the tensions and contradictions of worker agency in the gig economy on the food couriers.
I think I would need a bit more unpacking when it comes to, I mean, tensions and contradictions of worker agency. To what extent the workers? I mean, this question of flexibility that that was already mentioned, I think, is one such tension and contradiction. When on the one hand you have this notion of flexible work, but then obviously this is being challenged at every single point, as these workers, be they male or female, local or migrants, would come across. So I think this flexibility, it's quite a contentious term, in the same way that this idea of autonomy that workers have in the job that is highly praised and promoted, being your own boss, being autonomous, I think it's quite questionable as well in the ways in which algorithms allocate jobs. There's a lack of transparency, there's a lack of understanding of how these black boxes operate, basically. There's a lot of guesswork, there's a lot of conspiracy theory even to how these algorithms decide to give you or not to give you a job, or to send you places, be they for doing deliveries or for doing taxi, as in Trevi's case. So I think these are at least two of these myths that are there about the gig economy as being flexible, as being very autonomous kind of jobs, when they are very much far from that.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that, Cosmin. So I think this is a question which I'm going to ask Trevi, but also I think Cosmin can come on this as well. But first to Trevi. So the question is, what does the impact of precarious work contracts on on-demand gig workers? So what's the impact of those precarious work contracts on on-demand gig workers? I think you've sort of alluded to that in your talk. And I think the supplementary question that comes to that, I think is a question, is there an opportunity for turning, I think, the moment into a movement, I guess, which is about maybe trying to resist some of that or to try and influence that. So first to you, Trevi, on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin, and also Hannah for the question.
Yeah.
I think this will be something that's related to a legal implication of worker, and I think as also happen in many countries that workers are not classified as workers in this kind of like relations. And in the context of Indonesia, the kind of like worker employer relations that's described by the regulation is not cannot qualify this kind of like partnership. They called partnership relations between
Okay.
the platforms and also the workers. So the consequences is that, like many situations, the workers do not have an equal standing as it should be in a partnership relations, because then workers are still bound by the algorithmic decisions by the platforms, where you may see, I think in Indonesia context, we see that the kind of like scheme for payment, scheme for rates, schemes also for the bonus system can change regularly, or like in many cases it's not announced it's not announced publicly to just like everyone. So it's decided by platform only one-sidedly. So that's the kind of like imbalance that we see with the kind of like contract that these gig workers, especially in this ride hailing sector, experience. So this is the kind of like the thing that I think so many people out there, communities and worker associations or like worker union out there are trying to push forward. Probably some of us are pushing towards making them like being classified as worker, or for some other, the definition of worker probably not as salient as the treatment and also the condition, the working condition for these worker themselves. So we are like working towards like our like what we think is more important for these workers. However, I think we are trying to align forward to push off for a fairer working condition. And in this context also, about the movement and also the moment of protest and all, I think one thing that I think it's very interesting about Indonesia is that we do not yet have a solid worker protests or like movements
Okay.
together with like across different platforms. It's quite different with the case of like in the UK, for example, or in the US, where taxi drivers and also the case of Deliveroo couriers can go together and like put the case, send the case against the law and etc. However, in the case of Indonesia, unionize is not something that's very familiar to many, and the fear of being, like have uh, like hostility from came like from the platform. It's something that's very salient, and that's why also many of the communities that's in Indonesia, they are informal communities, and they do not like, not many of them are working towards having more legal talk with the platform. It's just like an informal where they gather together and discuss everyday things. So
Right.
yeah, I think that's something that's interesting about the Indonesia in contrast to the global trends.
Okay. Thanks for that, Trevi. So, Cosmin, I mean, maybe to pick up on that last point about the potential to turn the moment into a movement. I mean, from your experience in your research, is that happening perhaps in the kind of the areas that you've been looking at?
Certainly, it has, and I think, as I was saying in one of these slides, there's been a lot of dismissal of the capacity of these people to organize, precisely because they don't share a shop floor, or they don't share a kind of factory setting
Yeah.
where they would stand by the cooler and plot taking over the world.
Okay.
But this is happening nevertheless, and again, it's quite interesting how new technologies, or technologies more generally, are quite useful for this purpose, because many strikes in recent years have been organized with workers waiting for orders, indeed, as it happens in the UK, for example, and the algorithm sending them to a particular spot where they would get more orders, only for these workers to actually start organizing and exchange phone numbers and
Right.
exchange ideas about how should we uh, raise up resistance against these platforms. And this is also equally important to discuss here. To what extent 20th century forms of workers' organization is still something that these workers should use, considering the precisely intersectional precarity that these people have. Many of them are migrants, more than in other industries, perhaps. Many of them indeed are very mobile. Many of them are difficult indeed to capture and to represent by traditional unions, as I was saying. So I think there's a lot of potential here to be looking at what new trade unions are doing, more young ones, emergent ones, IWGB, for example, in London, or IWW in the UK, or more widely internationally. And I think in many places in Europe are such new forms of organizations, oftentimes couriers-led or workers-led, which start to understand and to devise better such tools for their causes, be there strikes or picketing or even shit posting when it comes to being on these platforms, social media handles, and just showing to everyone actually what is happening there. And I think more generally, and I think to an extent, this is what I am trying to do with my research here, is try to build bridges across industries, because I think there's not just the workers in the gig economy who are having a difficult time and have precarious employments, but down the line into the restoration system, for example, and industries are equally we can see a lot of precarious work there. And I think this kind of a solidarity has to be transnational on the one hand and across industry on the other hand, for workers to understand the situation of these people who are doing who are ordering a lot of food these days because of the pandemic, because there's a lot of work for themselves and they don't have the time to cook, as it happens oftentimes, but also the people in the restaurant who are on very low contracts. And I think these strikes have managed to take place to an extent in London, where people working for McDonald's or Wetherspoons became solidary with people doing deliveries. And I think that's what has to happen as well. And also there's a discussion and hope there actually in the cooperative movement, which has a radically different politics when it comes to how do we go beyond this platform capitalism. Can we build platforms that are run by couriers themselves? Is that possible? Can we create a turning point here? Because obviously there's a lot of questions about how to finance these platforms, which are cooperative owned. We don't have money from Amazon. We don't have hedge funds from Silicon Valley for that. So there's a lot of struggles, there's a lot of tensions, there's a lot of hopes as well, at least for me, and this is what drives my research.
Okay, thank you, Cosmin. So I think the question for you, Trevi, and this is coming from Heiko, I think, and I think you kind of addressed it already in your presentation, but nevertheless, it's an important question to ask, which is, are women more vulnerable to the effects of questionable job security and lack of employment that characterizes most of the gig economy? Any thoughts and comments on that? Trevi, I did, as I say, you did talk about it quite a bit, I think, in your presentation, but maybe something else you might want to add in relation to that.
Okay, thanks, Haikal, and also Kevin for the question. Yes, I think I've elaborated on the presentation before about how women experience a layer of lack of stability, especially in terms of job availability, that because of their gender, they're women, and they experience more constraint rather than their male counterparts. But I think overall, I think the questionable job security and also lack of employment benefit is something that's experienced by all gig workers, regardless what your gender is actually. However, the kind of situation that this at least our respondents of like single mothers experience is that once you are like there and out there, you have to work and earn money for your family. There are not that many options for this women in their like late 40s to work somewhere else
Right.
in like many sectors of like job area. They are requiring like a younger women. They tend to see the younger women like can work better than this, or like
Okay.
more interesting than the older one. So that's the kind of like another issues that they face when they want to opt out, like other than this kind of like object online. This is already good
Yeah.
enough for them, because otherwise they can get like the other option is not like way better anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Actually, just something that occurred to me, and I just wanted to ask you, which follows on about this and came up in your presentation. I mean, you obviously outlined the, to some extent, the sort of discrimination or disadvantage of being a woman working in this sector, right? In terms of the kind of the kind of ride hailing sector. Um, is there any advantages to being a woman? I mean, are other women more likely, who are passengers, more likely to choose to be to have a woman be the kind of the rider, or is that not coming out through the research?
Yeah, we were actually like when we before we interview this woman driver, we are expecting probably like probably more women are inclined towards getting a woman driver also. Probably that's the why platforms are encouraging for women drivers to apply. But the situation that's happened on the field is actually even women themselves are questioning the ability of women drivers when it comes to the driving capability. So
Right.
even that happened to between the women customers and also the woman drivers. So that's the advantage. Probably not so much, but
Right. Okay. Right.
yeah.
That's interesting, actually, because you might expect that to be the case. But just
Mhm.
following on from that, again, a question I had is that so. But what about the? Is there any advantage to being a woman driver for a woman passenger because of that there may be less likelihood of harassment by the driver for the woman? So if it's a female driver and a female customer, there's a chances of it's less likely to be harassment. And I just wonder whether, because certainly in the UK, where potentially we have women taxi drivers, that taps into a market for women passengers because they feel safer. And I just wonder if that may be the case as well in terms of the hail ride system.
Yeah, interestingly, it doesn't really come up in our interviews actually about that. However, I think there's actually some mechanism for the drivers when they want to the customer to feel safer, is that they installed like the kind of like a thin plastic wall between the drivers and also the customer, and that's what usually happen. And
Okay.
yeah, the kind of like I think, yeah, the assumption of like having woman driver is safer for like the issues of like sexual harassment, it
Yeah.
doesn't really comes up into the interview, but probably we will look more into it in the upcoming year for
Okay.
more interviews.
Okay. Great. Okay. Thanks, Trevi. So back to a question for you, Cosmin, and this comes from I think Nadia, and who thanks both of you for your insightful presentations. And the question for Cosmin is: what challenges do online food delivery workers face in taking collective action and building workers' cooperatives? Any thoughts on that, Cosmin?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. And I think this is a never-ending debate. To what extent can we build this into a movement? And we have had these platforms around for 10 years.
Yeah.
And despite all the strikes, we see indeed the resilience of these platforms for various reasons, mainly to do with the money they manage to pour into teams of lawyers and lobbying companies and the like, and to what extent we can have a winner in this David Goliath situation. It's quite difficult to discuss. And aside this balance of power here, I think there's also questions of the situations of many of these workers. As I mentioned in the presentation, there's the migrant status, which oftentimes is problematic when it comes to knowing what your rights are, having a legal status in the country, so you don't have a problem if you are thinking about going on a strike or protesting. The same happens with the time that this often the time that often these workers spend doing these jobs, because for many of them it's not a career. For many of them it's a transition job, and then the level of commitment, the level of being committed to go on a strike, to start organizing, to start knowing their own rights if they are young, as often it's happening if they are migrants, even more so. So there's oftentimes this problem with the time these people spend doing these. When it comes to workers' cooperative, the same issue. I think it's quite a challenge when it comes to who has the resources amongst these workers to say, okay, we will be working for the next half a year free of charge to set up such a collective and build our own software and platforms. It's an equal challenge, I think. But I think at the same time, this is where these legislators, these various state offices and the state needs to look into, if we are to address these issues, what are the alternatives on the one hand, and what are ways in which these workers can be protected indeed.
Sure. Okay. Just a question that came to mind, and I'd like to ask you actually, is to what extent, in terms of the ability of workers to kind of affect change, is sort of inhibited to some extent, possibly, by the fact that actually so many people actually use these platforms. So the customers using them arguably are kind of in some ways complicit, possibly, in kind of maintaining the status quo, right? And I just wonder how that plays into it, or whether there's any kind of way in which I don't know, it feels like a 1970s political thing, but the consciousness of the customers is somehow kind of brought to bear on this,
Yeah, and I think that's what I was trying to kind of mention as I was talking about these forms of solidarity that have to span across the board, not just within the gig economy and amongst the food courier in this case, but also understanding from a customer's perspective. Because I think many of the couriers I have been speaking with, they order via the platforms they work for. At the same time, these people who are ordering, they don't have the time to cook. So yeah, there is a complicity, but also I think that there's a reason to build alliances rather than blaming the ones or the other here. And I think one such important thing to do is trying to show the invisible work that's there, the kind of a work that's being put there, that it's nothing but flexible, it's nothing but autonomous. And I think the broader public needs to understand this. And I think this is why we as academics, we need to do collaborations with various other stakeholders, and to try to get this into to the broader public, not just into academic discourses about exploitation in the gig economy, because we've had them for so many years already, and they don't seem to do much of a difference unless we start building these alliances. So all the research, in my perspective, needs to be, to an extent, action research.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much for that, Cosmin. So I think a question from Nadia for you, Trevi. So now this is about, has there been any attempt by OJEC online platforms to improve the working conditions of the female workers that you talked about?
Okay, thanks, Nadia, for the question. So, yep, there has been some efforts actually, and one of the most salient ones that's now is quite championed by Grab, one of the platform, is that they introduced this. Uh, I know it might sound weird for the UK listener, like it's called Grab Lady. It doesn't mean to be derogatory.
Yeah.
It meant to be like it's a Grab drivers and they're women, so they called like Grab Lady. And when like when they see that there are so many cases that women worker receive harassment, especially when they are riding the motorbike.
Yeah.
Then they introduce this Grab Lady where they can choose to only have like the service of delivery for food and goods. So they don't have to have like a physical proximity with the customers, and they only deliver things and goods. So
Okay.
a lot of like women actually enjoy and attracted to be part of that community of like Grab Lady instead of like being a normal like driver who receive orders for the customers for like ride hailing. However, that also comes into to the trade-offs when like when it's about food delivery and also goods, especially food. I think here Nadia also mentioned about the long hours that you have to wait for the food to be like prepared and all, and it costs you like a lot of more time to invest in that long hours.
Yeah.
So that's also the trade-off of like them being in that sector. I think there are also some policies regulated by the platform to ensure like that the customer and also the driver do not do any sexual harassment. However, from some of the interviews, many of them told us that the kind of policies mostly towards the driver do not do the sexual harassment, but for the customer it's kind of like the since the position of the driver and the customer and the platform it's not balanced. They're afraid of like reporting the customer or to the platform, something like that. So yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for that, Trevi. So I think we're kind of running to the we've gone through all the questions that have come through, so that's really pleased to get those questions. But I think we've come pretty much close to the end of our joint seminar today. So just to say thank you to Trevi for her presentation. Thank you to Cosmin for your presentation. Thank you for answering those questions. Many thanks to the people, the audience who attended today, and for the questions that some of you have posed. So I think that the usual thing is that at some point that this recording will be made available online, I think, for people to view again if they want to. So I think the opportunity is there, and I think that colleagues at the Centre for Digital Society will probably make that available at some point to both the audience here, the audience in Indonesia and also the audience here in the UK. At some point in the future, ourselves here at Manchester Metropolitan University will liaise again with the Centre for Digital Society to arrange another joint seminar, but between our two institutions. So we look forward to doing that in the future. So all remains for me to say really is I hope you all have a very good rest of the day. I hope the weather gets better for those people in the UK. It looks terrible here, I have to say, outside my window at the moment, but we're hoping it'll improve. So have a good rest of the day. Take very good care, and look forward to seeing you at the next seminar. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Kevin.
you very much. Thank you, Kevin and
Thank you,
Cosmin.
everyone in the audience.
Have a great